Hello and welcome to this very special virtual event that is part of Rain Taxi's 2021 Twin Cities Book Festival. I'm Eric Lorber, the director of Rain Taxi. If you don't yet know about us, we are a nonprofit organization that champions aesthetically adventurous literature. I invite you to check out our website anytime after this event to learn more about our quarterly magazine of critical writing and all the other great programs we produce to help drive readers to where writing is going. In this program, as you can see, we are proud to present ASL interpreting access as well, and that comes courtesy of our dear friends at the University of Minnesota Libraries. We thank them for that. This event, like almost all of Rain Taxi's events, is free to attend, but if you're able to pitch in a little something, feel free to use the donate button at the bottom of your screen. Some funding for our annual festival comes from the Metropolitan Regional Arts Council and the Minnesota State Arts Board, thanks to legislative appropriations from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund here in Minnesota. But our most vital support has always come from individual readers, just like you. Whether you're a one-time donor or you'd like to become a Rain Taxi member and stay in touch with us year-round, we're grateful for your support. Don't forget about all the other ways you can participate on screen tonight. There's the chat where so many of you are chiming in already. Please keep sending your greetings and thoughts and observations there. It's great to have those shared. If you have a question for any of the authors, feel free to use the Ask a Question box. That's what it's for, and we'll get to as many of those toward the end of the session as we can. My favorite button of all is the one that says buy the book, because tonight, if you hit that button, you will be getting a copy of the Beatryce Prophecy from our good friends at Red Balloon Bookshop here in St. Paul, Minnesota, a great independent store. And the first several of those will still get one of the coveted beautiful book plates that have been signed by both Kate DiCamillo and Sophie Blackall. So many of our advance orderers have already secured those, but there are still a few left, so jump on that if you can. With this beautiful book in my hands, it's my great pleasure to welcome our guest tonight. Kate DiCamillo, it's, what can one say, Minnesota treasure. I'm going to stop before I keep gushing because she'll berate me if I go on too long. But up around here, she's as treasured as the Mississippi River, say, and I know that that is true everywhere she is reaching.
I've never been compared to a river before.
Good. I'm glad to be a first. This book, of course, has illustrations by Sophie Blackall, two-time Caldecott medalist, originally from Australia, but now a New Yorker, I think. And welcome again, Sophie. It was such a treat to have you here last year at our book festival.
Yeah.
And this part, I almost think I'm still dreaming. This event is being moderated by Ann Patchett, renowned novelist, one of my favorite essayists in the country. And we'll be celebrating Ann's new book of essays a little later in the year. So if you're not on our email list yet or following us on social or doing anything like that, sign up so we can notify you about registration for that virtual event when we post that next week. For now, I want to welcome everybody again. I'm so delighted. This book is such a treat. If you already have favorite Kate DiCamillo books, be ready to add this to the list. And as we welcome everybody here, I know that it's a little weird because we're all in different places, but pretend these folks are right up there on stage in front of you. Clap your hands, make some noise. It'll make you feel good. And I bet because there is magic in the world, they can hear you. Kate DiCamillo, Sophie Blackall, and Ann Patchett. Thank you.
Yay! Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Eric. That was really wonderful. And I have to say that although it is amazing to do these events in a room where we're all together, it's also really incredible to think of all the people that can be watching this event who weren't going to be in St. Paul tonight anyway. So everyone, everywhere, I'm really glad you're here. And Kate and Sophie, I'm really glad you guys are here and that we get to talk about this book. And so Kate and I are really close friends, and Sophie and I are friends through Kate. We are friends through an essential connection. And recently, just before the book came out, Kate said she was feeling a little nervous, a little stressed, and I said it just doesn't make any difference what happens when this book comes out, because this is a book that's going to be around forever and ever. It's a classic, and a book can be great, but a book can't very often be a classic, and that is thanks to the two of you and the intersection of your gorgeous work. Do you want to say hello to each other or anything before I jump in with my first question?
Oh, I think you should just, we
Yes.
say hello to each other all the time. Hello, Sophie.
Hello.
Hello, Ann.
Hi.
And we know that you have difficult questions, and we also know that you fully expect us not to answer them and to blow right past you as the moderator, because yes, so
You just be true to form.
right.
Okay, so I'm going to start. I did ask Kate and Sophie, I gave them homework, and so I asked them to bring questions for one another, so this can be more of kind of a group conversation. But in the last 2 days, I reread the book really carefully, and instead of getting swept up in it as a story, I was really marveling in the structure of it, just the way it's put together, both in terms of the writing and the illustration and how they play together. I could give an hour-long lecture just on the first chapter of this book and how it's structured, which is perfectly. And the thing that I kept thinking as I was reading it is every action has an equal reaction, what is it? What is it that they say? Every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
That the physicists say?
Right, Isaac Newton. So I was sitting right in this room where I am, and I said to my husband, so every action has an equal and opposite reaction. I said, give me a perfect example of that. And Carl went like this. So, of course, that's Answelica. That's the goat, who just from the very beginning establishes one thing hits and the other thing flies. And that happens over and over again in the book until the very end, and it's not to spoil because it doesn't spoil, but there is this perfect illustration of utter symmetry of Beatryce and Answelica, her goat, hand to hoof, and the whole illustration is balanced. Whereas everything before that is about running, butting, flying, moving forward. So,
can I say something, Ann?
Yes, please.
That's so intimidating what you just said, because it's so foreign to me to think of it that way. And I'm thinking, if I had heard you talk about that as I was writing it, I never would have been able to write it.
That's why I waited till now to
yeah,
tell you.
Right. I know. It's just like, it's because and you read stuff as I work on it. I'm so different from how you are. I don't know in advance what's going to happen. I can't think of things that way abstractly, like this and then this. And Sophie, that leads me, oh, whoops, here I go.
No, but it's fine. It's fine.
Well, it just makes me, it's very interesting, and something that doesn't get talked about a lot, because I love it that you went to that end illustration, which gives, like you said, nothing away. But Sophie, the question is, did you come up with that, or were you led into that by the art director? Whose vision was it? Did you execute your own vision? Did you feel it? or, you know.
Okay, so first of all, I think we should just let Anne do all the talking about this book. Anything we're going to say is just going to undermine all her ideas of how smart and thoughtful we are. However, I'm going to show you the very first drawing that I did in this big book, which was my Beatryce book. This is the very first drawing that I did. And
oh my God.
Oh
My God. Well, there it is.
It's the wrong goat because I hadn't read the text very carefully, and so it's a goat that has horns, and as well as it doesn't have horns. But that was the first. This was the first idea of this bond between Beatryce and goat, and of course, you know, often your first idea becomes your last idea. So that's where it ended up at the.
Oh,
at
wow!
But,
see, you know, it's so funny because and we had said this backstage that, you know, I feel like you and I, Sophie, have talked about this so much that I already know, and I had no idea, and it's so.
Yeah, and look, and so here's the actual first illustration of the book, which again, this is the physics, you know, the hit and the propulsion forward, whereas the first drawing that you did was the one of stillness and symmetry.
Yeah.
But there's always, can I just say, it's always the thing that I think, and Sophie, you write too, and Anne, of course, we know that you write. I'm always instinctually going towards that feeling in every story, not, you know, the goat and the girl hand to hoof, but rather just that unity. That's part of what telling a story is for me, is that feeling of, like, you know, it's that you know, art is pattern and life is chaos. So I'm always going towards that thing where you're bringing everything together, and I go towards it instinctually. So Sophie, did you see that in your head before you, or did you discover it as you drew it? Do you know what I mean?
I think it was one of those things where I was immersing myself in the illuminated manuscripts, and I was thinking about just their relationship of being friends and collaborators and compatriots, and so I had them balanced. But then everything else that I think of your stories has these meandering paths and roads and journeys and processions and parades, and so I think of it all as this kind of dynamic trajectory, and I don't often think of it as the static. So that to me was just more of a warming up. Who are these two people and how do they relate to each other? And then I think I showed it to Chris, our designer, who said, "Oh, that's what should happen at the end." So she's clearly the smart one here, who knew where to put it.
Chris and Anne, right?
Right. Well, Sophie, let me ask you a question about Chris, because there are things that I really wondered about in the design of the book, like the dingbats are so important in this book, and the illuminated letters at the beginning of every chapter.
And can you define dingbats for people who, because it's a inside baseball kind of.
They're the little Phillips, the little design repetitive Phillips.
Yes. They're the things down at the bottom. And
right.
Yeah.
But they're really extraordinary, and they do feel so connected to the book. So I was wondering if you picked those, and I was also wondering if you picked the illuminated letters, or even if you drew those illuminated letters at the beginning of each chapter.
So my response to both is going to have me voted off the show.
Good night, Sophie. Good night.
No, I wanted to draw both, and Chris was, no, we're going to go with these lovely William Morris designed letters, which are absolutely right. So she knew that mine would be just ever so slightly wonky, and the same with my dingbats. but I did draw a bunch of dingbats, and then she chose one that was like the seaweed that I had been drawing elsewhere. So she made a slight concession to my wonkiness. But no, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because people have, in a couple of reviews even, given me misplaced credit for those illuminated letters. So here on record, they are William Morris. But I did do that. I did do the end papers.
The end papers.
Fabulous.
There you go.
End papers. I mean, the end papers. It's just like,
Sophie, you've got a future in wallpaper. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Miss.
I'm happy to hear that.
I would like that in my bedroom.
Yeah, it is so gorgeous. Yeah. Okay, Ann, you're in charge.
Okay, so Sophie, just technically, because there's so few things that I know about this, do you get to pick the number of illustrations and how they pace in the book? Because I have to say, I love the fact they don't pace well. You know, like the book is very bottom heavy on illustrations. And I love that, because there's this way in which you pull back when there's a lot of action. And then at the end, when you're really moving into resolution, you get these gorgeous full pictures of all these people. And so it's not like someone's saying, it's not like a Nancy Drew book where every 5 pages you're going to get an illustration. So how does that all work?
Well, it's like, can I just say, again, totally like unaware, I was unaware of that, and it's a beautiful point. And it's like a crescendo kind of.
Yes.
And it's all, so it becomes symphonic, right? And then it's interesting to me too, just to have this whole talk about how much I don't know, which leaves the thing that I think the general reader doesn't know about. When a writer and an artist work together, they very much assume that we are working together. And I just want to get this out before Sophie talks about this, that it's not, we're not working together. We are purposely kept apart. And the little bit of communication that I had with Sophie was kind of like, we knew that we weren't supposed to be doing it. So I just want to say that, because it's just generally assumed that we're side by side in a room and making these decisions, and we're not. Okay, Sophie.
So I did get to choose how many drawings, in that I think they only wanted 6 or 12 or something, and I said, oh, that's not anywhere near enough. And they said, well, you're not getting paid anymore, so if you want to do more, that's on your head. And I'm always wanting to do more. So I think when I read a manuscript that I'm going to illustrate, I read it as a person who loves pictures in books, and I also try to read it as a child might, like, what do I really want to see on this page? Who do I want to know what they look like? And what bit, not that everything isn't beautifully described, but what does that tree look like? And when they climb up the tree, where are they in the tree? And what does the inside of the tree look like? And so all of those things just became, at that point of the book, well, we can't not show this. So yes, that's how the pictures ended up where they are. And I think in the beginning too, there's this momentum of the storytelling, and you don't need it so much there. You're just rollicking along through those pages. So.
And Kate, do you ever turn down an illustration or say, this isn't what I had in mind? And I have written 2 picture books, and the whole reason that I'm interested in it for myself is because I'm in love with Robin Price Glasser, and and we are so close, and we really do work on things together. So she sent me a picture of a girl jumping on a couch, and I said, that's not the right couch. She said, find me the right couch. So I go to all these furniture websites until I find the right couch, and I send it to her, and she sends it to her sisters, because she said, I don't think this is the right couch. And her sisters say, it's exactly the right couch.
This is why they don't want us to talk.
Yeah.
Right. But the last time that we started off on a project, I called her because I was writing about animals because I like animals. Turns out she doesn't like animals. And I said, let's start this in the other direction. What do you want to draw? Let me come up with an idea based on what you want to draw. So, friends, you ever thought about doing that? Because it's really cool.
Oh, well, I mean, Sophie's been so much in my brain since all of this. And she's become, so I have the Mercy Watson books, right? Where, because there are so many of those. And when I come up with a new character, I think, oh boy, I can't wait to see what Chris Van Dusen is going to do with this. But so I'm writing towards him as I write. And now I cannot tell a lie. There's a part of me that is writing toward Sophie, because so that doesn't mean that I'm gonna.
I'm looking very calm right now, but there's a little part that's exploding.
I mean, and I just so, and also there's remember, Sophie, when you sent me that email about the vending machine in Louisiana's way home, there is a sensibility. There's just something that flows between us, and so there's the same things that those penny toys from the Victorian era. When you sent me that article that Sergio had sent you, it's just so there's like so much that I feel like I wouldn't need to ask Sophie. I just feel like I would need to write the story and send it to her. Is that okay, Sophie?
That's my clever plot all along, was just to send you emails about things that I want to draw, wind up penguins and yes, whistling men in green outfits. Yes, please.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Good. Yeah. Ann.
Okay. So, Kate, you and I did a podcast together once. I can't remember what it was. And I was talking about Winn-Dixie and saying that every child's one of every child's primal dreams is that you have this relationship with an animal that no one can tame. So Opal comes in and Winn-Dixie is out of control and will listen to no one, but he will listen to her.
Mm-hmm.
Are you in a rut?
Am I in a rut?
Are you in a rut?
Creatively?
Because I think we're doing this. You're doing this again. I think that.
I thought it was a genuine question. I thought, Ann, you're going to ask that in front of everybody? No, I don't really feel like I'm in a rut. I don't know. Do you think I'm in a rut? Yeah,
I know in my own work, I never think that I'm repeating a pattern. And then I get far away from it and I think, oh my God, I'm really interested in this. I always say you have your magic animal books and your Kids in Trouble book, and that they overlap in certain ways. But Answelica, in a funny way, is like Winn-Dixie, in that here comes Beatryce, and the goat that no one can tame instantly goes to her, and they are this force of good and power and strength.
Yeah, it's also, and it's a wonderful point. And it's also just it's that how love and loving someone changes us beyond it's the transforming power of love. And I think that is one of the themes that I keep on unwittingly turning over again and again and again in every story. It seems to be a preoccupation with me. And like you, I'm not aware that I'm doing it until I have enough distance and I can see, oh, it's the same question. It's like, how do we transform ourselves? Through loving, and again and again and again. And that happens so emphatically with Answelica. But Beatryce loving her also transforms Beatryce. So, yeah.
It's interesting, though, because I think that Opal is the primary party being transformed by the love of Winn-Dixie, and Answelica is the primary party being transformed by the love of Beatryce.
Oh, that's a good point. I want to go back to something because Sophie and I had talked about this once. And when you were going to say one of the primal dreams of childhood, I thought you were going to say it's to walk into a tree. And I mean, did you have that, Anne, when you were a kid? And Sophie and I had talked about how much we love trees, and again, this is something that I did unwittingly. It's that moment of magic that I remember so clearly from when I was a kid. It's the Lucy pushing on the wardrobe, and it opens into another world, which is something that is possible. And that feeling is so psychologically right. And so, and to me, walking into a tree and living inside of a tree feels that way too. So yeah, that's just the point I wanted to make. Did you want to say anything about that, Sophie?
No, I'm just writing some notes, in case
in case you get called on by the teacher.
I'm going to be so prepared. Double-sided. Yeah. I have related tree things, but I think they might belong later on. So yeah, keep going. Yes.
Okay. Well, one of the things that seems, I have a couple of things that seem very primal to childhood. One of them is the voice of Brother Edic's father, and that voice of disapproval that he carries in his head. Do you both have that? Not necessarily from a father figure or really from any one person, but just that sort of disapproval from which you do good work.
Yes, for me. For you, Sophie?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I was telling someone only today that my mother, who I don't think is listening, but let's hope not, forbade me from driving with any other teenagers in a car. So it was just something I wasn't allowed to do. And so if we would be somewhere and somebody was driving and everyone would go off and I'd just be left standing behind forlornly. And I realized, of course, that I could go and she probably would never, ever find out. But the voice in my head was, if I die, then I'll be in trouble. So yeah, that's the voice. Yeah.
And do you have that voice?
Yeah, I mean, certainly not nearly as much as I used to. It has quieted over the years, but yes, sure. There's some disapproval. There's another quote that I want to read, and I want you both to talk about. That's sort of similar. It is very dangerous for you to be who you are, said Brother Edic, and so you must pretend to be someone you are not, which is so central to the book. But again, one of those things that I think is so central to the lives of all women, maybe to the lives of all people.
Yeah, and I hear it. It's funny because there are, I never go back and read a book once it's out of, the second pages, before it becomes the arc, because I don't. And so I hear quotes from the book and I think, wow. And I know exactly where it touches on me. It's not like I wrote it, but I know what part of me that accesses. And that was, not to get too deep into it, but that's my dad, who, I was just too smart for my own good. Kind of was that, tone it down. You shouldn't be, and that is where that came from. I can see it, and I hear it, and that's what I hear, and so it's really loaded for me. But when I wrote it, wasn't in my head at all. I wasn't thinking, oh, this comes from my father. Sophie, do you want to say something?
Yes, I do. That stopped me in my tracks to that line. And I'm sorry, I'm in Brooklyn and it's so noisy. And I think, and I'm curious, Kate, I suspect this might be one of those things where you might say, oh, this is another case where people tell me what my book is about after I've written it. But I think for a lot of children, a primal thing is that moment, and I don't know if either of you experienced this as a child, where you have an out-of-body experience and you're just, who am I? And you can almost see this person that is yourself, and there's this moment of total disconnect. And I think it's different from the sort of adolescent identity politics and everything else. I think it's just this moment of, I don't know who I am. I'm a person, and I have these conscious thoughts, and that is terrifying. And I think when Beatryce forgets who she is, that is that moment of, when you're a child, of who am I? And so then the whole idea that she has to be someone who she is not, when she still has this tenuous connection to who she is fantastic.
Anne, I think that instead of you talking, we should just have Sophie talk all the time. What do you think?
I'm actually really down with that. I think that's a very good idea.
I mean, that's brilliant.
Sophie, what's on that note card of yours? I want to know.
Oh, it's so many questions because you told me I wasn't allowed to ask you any questions, Anne. So they're all for Kate. But one of them is, I'm very curious. Why were you nervous about this book coming out? Because I was the opposite. I could not wait for people to read this book because I just knew that they would love it.
Why was I nervous? Because I always feel like it's like going out into the world without any armor at all. It's like you have to take off all the armor in order to write it, and then you get to put the armor back on, and then when it goes out, all the armor, you're totally unprotected. Anybody can say to you, I do not like that, and it hurts because it's a part of you. I never know if it's any good or not. I can look at your art and see that it's beautiful. But Anne, what do you want to say from a psychoanalysis standpoint there?
Oh,
because I can feel you like wanting to stop me. Yeah.
Well, you and I have talked a lot lately about the whole kind of PTSD around publication and pre-publication, and how even if everything is going wonderfully, there's something in your body that remembers all of the times that it was hard. I think in my life, sitting at signing tables, no one has ever cut out a great review and brought it to me. But the number of times people have cut a deeply eviscerating review out of a newspaper, folded it up, and very quietly slid it across the table and said, I don't know if you've seen this. I mean, that is a real thing that happens all the time. You could get one bad review for a book, and everyone's going to cut it out and very quietly break the news.
Yeah, you're just utterly vulnerable. I remember somebody waiting in a 2-hour signing line for Despero, and she said to me, "This is a terrible book. I just read it in line." And it was like, okay. I mean, it's just like, I don't even know what the rejoinder is there. Thank you for coming. I mean, what are you supposed to say? So I mean, it's that you are kind of like you're braced, because in order to do it right, you have to go out unprotected. And so those things you can't protect it. You can't protect yourself in order to tell the story, and you can't protect yourself when you go out into the world, because otherwise it's the whole game is pointless. Do you know what I mean?
I don't agree.
To be open to everything.
I don't agree. I actually think there is, for me at least, a certain element of self-protection when I go out into the world, not when I write, but when I go out, I am wearing my Iron Man suit. My favorite story is when Bel Canto came out. I got a letter from a guy who was a doctor, and he said, I have read a novel every week for most of my life. And not only is this book so bad that I will never read one of your books again, this book is so bad, I don't know that I will ever be able to read fiction again. And I went, I mean, that's just like, I actually felt kind of gleeful. And I had like 2 10s, a 5, and a 1 in my wallet. It was cash. And I wrote on the bottom of the letter, 100% cash back, satisfaction guaranteed. Only wish for your happiness. So sorry for the inconvenience. Here's your money. And then he writes me back, and he sends me back the same 2 10s, a 5, and a 1, and says something like, you've got real moxie, kid. I like you. I'm going to read all of your books. But I kind of feel like constantly it's that quest to meet the challenge and figure out a way to break it down. Somebody reads the book in line and hates it. There's just comedy in that.
Yeah, I always say, Sophie, you probably remember these, and some of the people listening might too. Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. I always call Ann a weeble. She's very well balanced. I fall down, but I did sign that woman's book. She wanted it signed, so yeah.
But there is something great about finding the 1-star Amazon review. You just got to go straight to the 1-star review and read that, and they're great. They're just so weird. It sets you up for everything else that's going to come afterwards.
I just read something at the end of a piece I had written for the Times, and I always swear that I never ever read these things. And then I was having a conversation with someone, and I did read them. And it said, Ann Patchett is a has-been author and a washed-up bookseller. And I thought, damn it, I may be a has-been author, but I am not a washed-up bookseller.
And what does that even mean?
Right. What does that mean?
It means that there's some 12-year-old boy at 4:00 in the morning with a computer twisting the knife. I interviewed Margaret Atwood, which was absolutely the most terrifying thing I have ever done in my life. You want to know why nothing scares me? I've interviewed Margaret Atwood. And we were talking about this thing of like, what about pushback? What about saying these things that are going to bring all the trolls out from under the rocks? And she said, you don't, for all you know, it is the equivalent of a prank phone call in the 70s, basically. You don't know if somebody's serious or just pulling your chain. And you don't know if it's some Russian bot just generating unkind things to stir the global pot. And if you don't have the courage of your convictions, then you shouldn't be writing.
Which takes us back to it is. And I wonder if you feel this way, Sophie, with art, that it takes courage. I think it takes huge courage to create. I mean, Ann, don't you think?
Sure.
Yeah.
And I really want to hear about that from Sophie.
Yeah.
Creates in the different, like, I know the courage it takes for me and for you, but I want to hear it from Sophie.
Yeah.
Well, and then this is sort of almost a question for both of you. I'm going to throw it back to you. I think part of the courage is letting it go, is that knowing when you're willing to say, all right, it's out of my hands. And that's one of the hardest things for me. Almost every book I've done has been snatched from me. If you don't give this to us now, it won't make the list, where you have to give us our money back. And it's like, just like one more week. And so I'm curious for both of you, like, what's that process like? How do you relinquish it? How do you know when you're done, or does somebody else make that decision for you?
Yeah, well, I think, and Anne, I'll be curious to hear what you say about this. It's just like the very first thing, and I used to go around quoting you all the time, Anne, about, you make a compromise from the first time you put the first word down. That's you, right? Your beautiful vision is compromised. So you know that it's never going to be this beautiful thing that is in your head. It's always going to be a pale shadow of that. And also, it's never going to be perfect. And then I know when to let it go, because I have a feeling, and this never works when I talk to kids. It's only adults who understand this feeling. It's a feeling that is very similar to it being 3 o'clock in the morning, and you're going to take an exam at 8 o'clock. And you know that you could stay up until 8 o'clock in the morning and just keep on cramming more stuff in your head. And it would be very easy to do. But you also have this feeling that if you don't stop now, you might kind of undo the knowledge that is in there, and that you should just let it go and get 4 hours of sleep and go and take the exam. And that's the way it feels with a story. It's just like, I could work on this and try to make it perfect, and it's going to start unraveling if I do that. It's time to let it go. And does that feel that way?
Yes, and for me, it was years and years through high school, college, and through graduate school, taking drawing classes. And I think that in visual art, there's a much better understanding that you can ruin something by overworking it. Whereas writers always believe that they can somehow magically scroll it back 3 drafts and get that energy, but that things have an energy and a life force. And if you take it too far, you will kill it. Also, I think about that whole thing about Amish quilts and how you always tilt one square because you aren't to try to mimic God. You're not looking for perfection, and that perfection is life, is energy, and that if you try to get all the squares exactly right, you will kill it. So I'm very good at letting things go, and I would always rather let things go maybe 2 or 3% before it's as good as it could be than to take it 2 or 3% past where it should be.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anne, should we do questions?
But Sophie just opened her mouth, so let's.
I was going to ask you a question, Anne, about having said that, and then revisiting short stories, but you don't have to answer that.
All right. So then let's bring Eric back, and he will bring us the good news of audience questions.
Right, and questions for Anne too, I bet. Yeah.
I bet you're right. But before we get to questions, I want to just say thank you. Oh my gosh, you are, we all listening to 3 of the greatest living creators in their respective genres. You are just electrifying all of us watching, and we're just so grateful. So thank you. I want to also remind everybody watching that, oh my gosh, if this is not on your shelf yet or not yet in the mail to you, let our friends at Red Balloon Bookshop mail it to you by hitting that buy the book button.
And also, if you buy a first edition now and you put it on a high shelf, you can sell it when it's time for your kids to go to college.
Spoken like a true bookseller. Thank you.
Not a washed up bookseller.
No.
Right.
I do want to get to some of these audience questions, and our first one is for both Kate and Sophie. It's coming from a reader named Janet, and Janet wants to know about if either or both of you did research or read certain books, and especially as relates to the time period of this book, which is a little bit unusual. So we'd love to hear about that.
Janet, I did no research at all. So my answer is because I thought that I mean, to me, I was in no time period. I was in fairy tales. And in fact, there is a line at the end of this book that says, all this happened long ago, or perhaps it has yet to happen. And so I kind of squarely put myself there. And so, but I know that Sophie, you probably got to do a lot. I know that you did a lot of joyful research. Yeah.
I did do joyful research. Research for me is almost always joyful. But I learned very quickly on from reading Kate's manuscript that this was set in a time long ago, or perhaps not yet. So I didn't worry myself too much about being loyal to any particular period. And I knew that when I came across quite early on a field of elderhist flowers. And I thought, oh gosh, I know a fair few flowers. I've never heard of an elderhist, and I'll just Google that so I know exactly how to draw it. And of course, it's not on Google because it came out of Kate's head. And then I thought, oh, okay, we're fine. So I can come up with these sorts of clothes and robes and things that are in the spirit of this time, but we can have fun with this. But having said that, there was delightful research about illuminated manuscripts, so that was a style thing, but not.
And you did some goat research.
Oh yes, thank you. Yes, there was some goat research. I have a very good friend who has a goat farm in Vermont, and she was very generous, sending me, without being able to tell her why, daily pictures of her goats, which is fantastic.
Yeah. Well, speaking of our dear animal friends, surely one of the great animal creations here is Answelica the goat. A reader named Holly has a special friendship with a sunfish in the lake where she lives. And she wants to write a children's book about that friendship, and is asking all of you, do you have any advice?
For how to write a book about friendship with a sunfish? What is the sunfish's name, I wonder, Holly? But that's okay. I mean,
Greenie.
you don't have to tell me.
Greenie.
Greenie.
Mimi?
Greenie.
Oh, Greenie. Mimi is kind of fun too. Yeah, I think where to start. That's always the question. It's like, and who's going to tell it? Is it going to be Greenie, or is it? I mean, who's telling the story? I don't know. Does anybody have any advice? Because to me, it's always, if you know that you want to tell a story, you just keep on finding out the way in, which door leads into telling it. And sometimes you have to go through a lot of doors until you find the right one.
I have thoughts, but there may be lots of questions, so I don't know how long we want to spend on sunfish. But I am curious how one has a friendship with a sunfish.
I wondered it too.
Their eyes are so odd. And do you have to be, do you just talk to one side of the sunfish? Or that's the ones that I'm thinking about, right? Where their eyes are on one side.
Yeah,
very funny. I can imagine wanting to be friends with a sunfish because they're hilarious, but.
Well, all these great questions, maybe we'll lead them to some answers. What about a daily writing practice? Do any of you have a really, a system, a daily practice?
Yeah, for me, and this is a point that I love to make. There's no right way to do this. The only wrong thing that you can do if you want to write is not do it if it's something that you feel like you want to do. For me, what works is to show up and do a little bit each day, and to kind of coax myself through it that way. Somebody like Ann, I know her writing process. It's totally different than mine. It's so different that it's almost incomprehensible. But it very much hits on that point of, you need to find out the way that works for you. And that's the difficult thing about teaching writing, is it is an individual journey, right? I mean, Sophie, you in addition to your art, you also write your books. So Do you have a daily practice?
I do not. I'm terribly writing for me has to happen when I'm not really looking at it, which doesn't really make sense because you have to actually look at it. But often it will happen mostly in my head, and I have to be doing something else, going on a very long drive or a long walk or in the shower, and then it's when I'm not trying to think about it too much. That's when it will. The next idea or the thing that I'm trying to solve will be solved, and then I can go and write it down. But
And do you want to say your process really quickly, because I think it's fascinating how, I mean, these are three very different things. So
I just work it in when I can, basically.
But you also write basically the whole. You carry the novel around for years in your head, working on it before you ever sit down to write.
Right.
And you know what's going to happen by the time you sit down to write, and I don't. So it's different for everybody.
Yeah, and then I was having a conversation with Louise Erdrich not too long ago, and she was saying, "Oh, well, I work on 3 or 4 or 5 things at the same time," and you do that. That seems inconceivable to me. I'm so concentrated. Sophie, do you have a daily drawing practice? Do you draw?
That's just called a deadline. That's what that is. Yeah. Yes, but I'm so curious about that because I feel like I have different rooms in my head, and there's the room at the front, which is the thing I'm working on that's on my desk and is nearly finished and I'm very late with and on deadline. And then a little bit back from that is the thing that's in development and that I've probably drawn and has a draft. And then back there is the fun room where things are just bouncing around, and that's where I want to spend most of my time, back in the, it's the basement really.
Where the goats are playing badminton, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Well, speaking of animals, a lot of interest here, and this one has some interesting geography too, because Cheryl is writing from Oregon and wants you to talk about the seahorse, and some folks from Reading, England, maybe Reading is just in their moniker, are asking about the Wolf King chapter, the Wolf King character in the book. And I think a great reminder that Answellica is not the only animal in this book.
Right. So, there is a seahorse, and there is a wolf king, although I had forgotten about him. But it's so much fun because that's kind of a story that Beatryce remembers, and that I got to tell. So it's a story within a story, which always seems delicious to me. And I'd like to just say about the seahorse real quickly that there's a scene in this book where Beatryce is dreaming, and she dreams of that seahorse tumbling through the air and not landing, and turning from side to side. And I had started this book and I forgot about it. And I discovered in a closet like 8 years after I'd started it. And periodically throughout that time period, I would see that seahorse and remember that scene and think, I wonder where I read that. I couldn't, it was just, that's how much I divorced myself from this story. And so it's so interesting to me that as I was putting everything together after I'd written the story to find out that the hippocampus is seahorse shaped, and that's actually where the memory is, a lot of memory, and so much of this book. This brings us back to Sophie. You and I had talked again and again about as I was telling this story, it felt like something that I already knew or had dreamed and was remembering. And Sophie, when you were making the art, you said you had the same feeling.
Yeah, exactly. That these characters had already always existed, and that that there was some sort of magic that doing drawings and then looking back and not really remembering making them, which is just the best kind of drawing. It doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, and it doesn't happen very often with the writing either, but that's what happened. Yeah. So one went far afield on that question. Sorry. Yeah.
I said, which is why the book is magic.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I think you went just far enough because yeah, the Wolf King and the Seahorse ask us to go that far, no doubt. Uh, Alita is asking how each of you got your start in in the art that you practice, and is it what you dreamed of doing when you were young?
Ah, that's a beautiful question. Who wants to go first?
You do.
Yes, you go first.
I didn't start writing until I was 30, but I'd wanted to do it for a long time. And I started out by writing short stories for adults, and I kind of I backed into writing for children because of a book called The Watsons Go to Birmingham, 1963, by Christopher Paul Curtis that I read when I was working at a book warehouse. And pretty soon after that, I started on my first novel for kids, which was Because of Winn-Dixie. And I remember thinking, as I was writing it, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is where I should be. This is it. And so that moment has stuck with me, that feeling of this is the work that I am supposed to be doing. And I am so grateful to be doing it. And I can't believe how lucky I am to get to do it.
And I was one of those really annoying kids who knew what they wanted to do when they were 7. And I spent most of my childhood up a tree in Australia reading books. And my brother was in the next tree. We had a basket on a rope, and we would pull the basket back and forth with books, and we would swap books. And my favorite books were mostly things that happened in trees. I loved The Wind in the Willows and Winnie the Pooh and The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which isn't quite a tree, but there's that similar kind of sense of the pushing through the wardrobe and into the other world. And but I used to trace the drawings, especially E.H. Shepard's Winnie the Pooh and Wind in the Willows, and I would trace them over and over and think, I wanted to figure out how those lines joined up, how those characters were made, and how I could possibly do that myself. And it took a while, but yes. So the yes is the answer to that.
Yeah.
I just love that. I've heard stories of people sitting down and typing chapters of their favorite book, but I've never heard people tracing drawings that they love, and that makes so much sense to me. That's
and how the lines join up to make
yeah. And you and your brother and the basket and the trees, which somehow just sounds like I don't know, like an Australian cliche of how we imagine children in Australia are living. It's just everything I want to believe.
Except the thing about Australia is everything wants to kill you there. So, there was this constant threat of, danger of death. So apart from that.
There's a fabulous nonfiction book called Bitten. And I can't remember what the woman's name is, but it's an account of everything on earth that can bite you and kill you. And half of the book is dedicated to Australia. It was so fascinating.
That's maybe why Sophie lives in Brooklyn.
Maybe.
Yeah. Well, this isn't a question, but a reader, Nancy, is reminding us that in Kate's Newberry acceptance speech, she used the word capacious, and that tonight feels like that word. And I couldn't agree with that more. This has been a capacious, generous, and inspiring conversation, and we are all so grateful to you. If people want more capacious, exciting conversations, I want to invite them to more of what we're doing. For folks who are watching in the Twin Cities, we will be reuniting at the Minnesota State Fairgrounds this Saturday in person. Lots to do, safely spread out, and all sorts of things. Check out our website and join us if you can. If you are from farther away or from close by, we have some great virtual events coming up, including, as we'll announce next week, one in which we get to have Ann Patchett come back and talk about these precious days with Kate DiCamillo. So we are really glad for that. For now, I want to just thank you all again. I want to thank our media sponsors because they help us get the word out. And they are Minneapolis St. Paul Magazine, Minnesota Public Radio, the Star Tribune, and Twin Cities Public Television. And again, the Metropolitan Regional Arts Council and the Minnesota State Arts Board are invaluable supporters. But mostly, I want to thank our authors and every single person watching, because we all create this magic together. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
readers.
you.
Thank you, Ann.
Bye.
Sophie, thank you, Eric.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Good night.